In the midst of uncertainty, our faith can struggle. Our walk becomes labored, our heart heavy. There's something about the unknown which seems to weaken us. It drains our patience and blurs our focus. Yet, in the middle of everything, stands a faithful God. A God who's not swayed by the struggle, who isn't moved by the winds of chaos. A God who remains faithful even when our faith is fragile. It seems more difficult than ever to not worry about tomorrow. Yet that's exactly what God has asked us to do. For when we cast our burdens on Him, the troubles of the moment begin to fade. When we trust the plans He has for us, our fear begins to subside. When we fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, our focus becomes consumed by clarity. Yes, we are in the midst of uncertainty, but we can be certain of one thing: God is faithful. And that is more than enough for tomorrow.
Grace and peace. I have some good news. Ready for some good news? We have a nursery worker. She's here, and she's, can we give God a round of applause? Because that's been probably a 6-month ordeal trying to hire somebody. Her name is Kat, K-A-T, and she's awesome. So parents, go meet her and drop off your kids, because she's a wonderful person. Hey, next week, next Sunday, is on the Christian calendar, is called Christ the King Sunday. And it's the last Sunday of the Christian year. So that means 2 weeks from today is the beginning of a new year, what we call Advent. And so when we get to a new year, I get to say Happy New Year to you. And that'll feel really weird at the end of November, but we follow the Christian calendar, so get ready for it. But also, we're going to have our new intersection journals. So be on the lookout in the next couple weeks. It's a really cool cover. So you'll get a new one to start the new year, to read the Bible along with us. Now, if you read the Bible this past year, great, continue to do it. If you didn't use the intersections, I would encourage you to start the new year fresh with a new journal, and encourage you to dig into God's Word. And then also, we ordered some postcards to be distributed with the meals for More Than a Meal for Thanksgiving. And so we ordered extra. And so these are great invite cards that you can use to invite friends or family or neighbors to church. They're in the narthex on the Welcome Center. Grab as many as you want. We have plenty. They have, on one side is the signs that we have outside saying, love your neighbor who doesn't look like you, think like you, love like you. And on the other side has the church information. So feel free to grab as many as you want and use to invite people to Sandy Hook. Amen? All right, so we're in a sermon series called A Life That Matters. And we kicked it off last week. And the premise of it is I believe that most people do desire to live a life that makes a difference. Deep down, when we stop from the busyness and the craziness, we all want to make a difference. We all want to live a life that matters. And it's challenging because we live in a crazy world, a world like we talked last week that's changed so much. And it's very easy for us as disciples of Jesus, as followers of Jesus, to get distracted or confused on what does it mean to live a life that matters. And we simply clarified last week that the Bible teaches, Jesus teaches, to live a life that matters is to be a disciple of Jesus who makes more disciples. To be a disciple of Jesus that makes more disciples. We phrased it this way, on a life that matters is becoming like Jesus and influencing others to do the same. To be a disciple who makes disciples. The United Methodist Church's mission statement is to make disciples for the transformation of the world. So even though the world is crazy, even though the world has changed, even though our worlds may be confusing and challenging, the call, the mission is the same: to make disciples, who make disciples, who make disciples for the transformation of the world. Amen? So last week we talked about the widow who gave everything. And we also learned in that passage of Scripture that the scribes, the rulers, the people who were over the temple, they were given the responsibility of taking care of the widow, but they weren't taking care of the widow, and the widow gives all. So what you learned last week, that Jesus, as he calls his disciples, he calls us to be people of justice. We take care of the needy around us. We take care of the widows and the orphans and those in the margins. But we also live a generous life, a life of generosity, like the woman who gave all. We are called to give all that we are able to the kingdom of God. So this week, we're going to be talking about the passage that Sarah just read, and the title of the sermon is Not One Stone. Not One Stone. So I heard a story of a preacher who asked his congregation, "How many of you want to go to heaven? Please stand up." And everyone in the congregation stood up. And then he said, "Please be seated." He now says, "How many of you want to go to hell? Please stand up." And for a while, no one moved. Then finally, one man stood up. And the preacher looked at him in surprise. "You want to go to hell?" he asked. "Not really," replied the man, "but I hated to see you standing there alone, Pastor." Yeah, that's pretty dumb. Anyway, so last week we talked about how the pandemic has changed. And the world that we live in is different now. And to be honest, I think there are a lot of people, maybe you're here today, that the changes and the challenges that this new world is bringing to you are very difficult. And some of us have been struggling through this season. Some of us have lost loved ones. There's been changes with school. There's been health concerns. There's job changes. A lot of people are feeling insecure, and a lot of people are afraid. And I think this fear, we're afraid of what we see in the world. I mean, sometimes it feels like our world is falling apart. And sometimes when we look inward, it feels like our lives are falling apart. We're afraid of what's going on today. And then as we take a look at the future, sometimes many of us are afraid of what we see in the future. We're afraid of what this world is going to be like for our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids. I mean, where is this all headed? Today, we want to address those questions. We want to address that fear. And I believe as we clarify and we focus in, the big idea for today, Jesus tells us this, that a life that matters is becoming like Jesus in hope and influencing others to do the same. Last week we talked about generosity and justice. Today we're going to be talking about living a life of hope and influencing others to be people of hope as well. Now, the Bible story for today that we're talking about is Mark chapter 13, and this story is crazy. This is a story that would be referred to as apocalyptic literature. It's one of those passages, really the whole chapter of Mark chapter 13. It's one of those passages that deals with the destruction of the world around us and the predictions of the end times. But I believe there's more than that. And I believe as we take a look at this passage, Jesus is going to show us how we are to live today in light of this crazy world that we live in, and also to have hope for tomorrow. So the story starts in Mark chapter 13, verses 1, and I'm going to read out of the Message because it just gives a little bit different of a flavor than the NIV. As he walked away from the temple, one of his disciples said, "Teacher, look at the stonework, those buildings." Jesus said, "You're impressed by the grandiose architecture? There's not one stone in the whole works that is not going to end up in a heap of rubble." So picture this scene. Jesus and the disciples, where they're looking at the temple. It's magnificent. It's huge. It's ginormous. It is just a beautiful structure. And the disciples were amazed by it. They were in awe of the architecture. They were in awe of the stonework. It was just an awesome structure. And then imagine Jesus kind of deflates the mood in the room. He comes up and says, you see that you think is awesome? It's going to fall down. It's all coming down. It's going to be a pile of rubble by the end. And I imagine the disciples were quite disappointed at Jesus' comments. But what is Jesus up to here? What is he trying to say to the disciples? Remember, Jesus was teaching his disciples, always teaching the disciples. Everywhere they went, he was teaching them a lesson. And so we're the byproducts of these lessons. So Jesus is teaching his disciples, and Jesus is teaching us today. So what is Jesus trying to say as they look at this temple structure? Now, last week, we talked about how Jesus condemned the scribes because they weren't taking care of the widows. You remember that? The scribes were given the responsibility in Deuteronomy to take care of those in the margins. And what were the scribes doing? They were devouring the widows' houses, right? They were not doing what they were called to do. And so you take a look at Jesus' message towards the temple throughout the Gospels. Remember the story where Jesus turned over the tables? Jesus turned over the tables of the money changers. You know, he had a whip and let loose the doves. You remember that story? What was going on there? When I grew up, I always thought that Jesus was upset because people were selling stuff in the church narthex. But that's not at all what was going on here. Jesus was upset because the temple was oppressing poor people. Poor people came to the temple to make sacrifices, and the money changers were corrupt, so they were charging this enormous exchange fee to transfer their coins to temple coins. And basically, between that and the people who were selling the doves because they had to be perfect, or selling the sheep because they had to be perfect, they were not allowing poor people to be able to worship. And Jesus was ticked, right? So he turned over the money changers. He did that because they were oppressing poor people. It's the same thing that he was saying last week with the scribes. They're not taking care of the widows. In other words, the temple, the Old Testament temple, had responsibility to take care of the people in society, right? That's what the church does. We take care of people. What would happen if we would stop taking care of people? What happens if we would stop doing things like helping people at Thanksgiving or Christmas? Well, we wouldn't be the church. And the temple was struggling with that. Do you remember the one story where Jesus cursed the fig tree? He was making a statement against the religious structure of the day. And so when Jesus is saying that temple's coming down, it was an act of judgment towards that temple system. It was corrupt. And we see that today. We see systems and we see organizations, we see institutions, because instead of being outward focused, they become inward focused and they become corrupt. And Jesus speaks words of judgment. And those are harsh words, right? But there's something else going on here that I want us to hear. Do you remember the story of, in the Sermon on the Mount, the wide road and the narrow road? Ever remember that story? There's a wide road or a wide path that leads to what? Destruction. And there's a narrow road or a narrow path that leads to life. Now, I always heard, growing up, that was about eternity. You go down this wide road, you're going to hell. You go down the narrow road, and you're going to heaven, right? But that's not at all what Jesus is talking about. I think it works that way. I think it's a good message. But Jesus was talking about now. If you go down the wide road, what's going to happen? There's going to be destruction. And if you go down the narrow road, you're going to experience life. The kingdom of the world is the wide road, right? And the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, is the narrow road, right? There is the road of God. There is the road of Satan. There's two paths. And if you go down the wide road, which everybody's on, the popular road, the comfortable road, you go down this wide road, it will lead to places of destruction. Now, the kingdom of the world is all about violence and greed and idolatry, right? So you go down this path, eventually self-centered people, like you and I, right? We go down this path, we end up being envious of one another, we end up being jealous of one another. One country is upset with another country, one relationship is broken, and before you know it, you have Cain and Abel. Before you know it, you have nation against nation, a war, one country warring against another country. This wide path leads to destruction. And when you go down this path, when humanity goes down this path, temples will be destroyed. Nations will be destroyed. People's lives will be destroyed. That is the natural byproduct of living a life of sin. And so Jesus says there's this wide path that leads to destruction. And so one thing that Jesus is saying, as humanity goes down this path, don't be surprised when there's wars. Don't be surprised when people hurt one another. Don't be surprised when there's earthquakes because we're not taking care of creation. Don't be surprised when people go after people. Don't be shocked when you hear rumors and see violence because this is the path that the world is on. But I have a different path. There's the hell on earth path, the wide road, and there's heaven on earth path, the life of justice and the life of mercy and the life of joy and the life of love. This is the life that this is the path that Jesus went on. And so there's two paths. What happens with the temple is what happens in our world, is when we go down this wide path, when we go down the path of destruction, God says to us, you want this? You want to go down this path? You know it's going to destroy you. I'll let you. It says in Romans that God turns us over to the lusts of our heart, that God allows us to experience what we want. That's what's referred to as the wrath of God or the judgment of God, is when God allows us to get what we want. If you want to go on the wide path, go ahead. If you want to go down this path, humanity, group of people, church, you want to go down the wide path, don't be surprised when you experience hell on earth. Don't be surprised when nation goes against nation. Don't be surprised when family goes against family. Don't be surprised when there's fights at your family reunion or Christmas party, because this is the way the world works. If you look at history, look at Cain and Abel, through modern history in the history books, this is the way the world works. Don't be surprised when temples fall and are destroyed. So Jesus is talking about a historic event. The temple was destroyed in AD 70. Turns out that Jewish revolutionary zealots decided to poke the bear called Rome. And what did Rome do? Came and wiped them out, destroyed the temple. There was not one stone left. So Jesus knew it. Jesus knew it because he was the Son of God and knew all things. But he also knew what was inevitable. You go down this path, you're going to destroy each other. And that's history, isn't it? You go down that path of selfishness, you're going to hurt one another. You're going to abuse one another. You're going to tear each other up. But Jesus says there's another path. We keep going on this passage, starting in verse number 3. Later, as he was sitting on the Mount Olives in full view of the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew got him off by himself and asked, tell us when this is all going to happen. What sign will we get that things are coming to a head? Jesus began, watch out for doomsday deceivers. Many leaders are going to show up with forged identities claiming, I'm the one. They will deceive a lot of people. And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, keep your head, and don't panic. This is routine history and no sign of the end. Nation will fight nation, and ruler will fight ruler over and over and over and over. Earthquakes will occur in various places. There'll be famines, but these things are nothing compared to what's coming. So Jesus says to his disciples, number one, watch out. Because there will be people in life that will lead you astray. There will be people that will lead you on this wide path. They'll say it's a good thing. They'll say it's even Christian. They'll say it's a good thing for the church, but they will lead you on the wrong path. Talks about false messiahs and false teachers and false preachers. Church, I just want to say, if we keep our eyes focused on Jesus, if we follow Jesus with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, we do not need to worry about being deceived. But if we hear the whispers of other things, we hear the whispers of things like the prosperity gospel, if we hear things that are pulling us away from Jesus, then don't be surprised that they're a deception. So watch out. Watch out for people that try to get you to go on the other path. Watch out. And that's something that we have to deal with today. It happened back in those days, but with all the media that we have and all the sermons that are available and all the stuff that's all over social media, all the podcasts of all the different churches and ministries, we have to be careful. that we don't get our focus off of Jesus. Keep our eyes focused on the one, the exact imprint of the Father. Amen? The second thing that Jesus said in this passage is, when you see all these things take place, don't panic. Don't panic. Don't be afraid. About to happen. Don't be surprised when nations go against nations. Are you surprised when you turn on the news and there's a war somewhere? No. Jesus is saying that it's the inevitability of people walking on the wide path. But Jesus says it doesn't have to be that way. The way the world is now is not the way that the world will be. Jesus is letting us know that even though all of these horrible things that are taking place in our world today and will take place in the future, one day, Jesus' kingdom will come in its fruition. Jesus will come back and make all things. So we're called to watch out today. We're called not to panic and not be afraid when things go crazy in our world, but to have trust and hope that the promises that we see in the scriptures that God will come back in Jesus to make all things new. We hold on to that. Even though the world is the way that it is, it's not always going to be that way. One day, Jesus is going to come and make all things new. And he's working through people on this path, even now, to allow his kingdom to break in on earth as it is in heaven. Now, this great ministry that Sarah is doing, right? This is the narrow road, right? There's a lot of other things we could do, right? There's a lot of other things. There's a lot of Netflix shows, right? I mean, there's some good stuff on television, right? I'm just being playful here. A lot of things we could do on that Wednesday. Or we could do this. You see what I mean? There's choices in life, right? And I'm not guilting anybody to do anything. But I'm saying there's this path. There's this road. There's these boxes here, right? These boxes. Imagine a child in South America or Africa or anywhere opening a box like this full of stuff that somebody in love gave them. This is life-changing. We went to the store. When was that? Was it Friday? Saturday? It was a joy to pack up with these boxes, right? A lot of fun there. But there was other things I could have done on that day. And there's other ways I could have spent that money. You know what I mean? There's choices that we have in life. And then there's this hands and feet. Hi there. Hands and feet. These are tags of Christmas presents for people in need in our community. This is hands and feet children. And so one of the things you can do is you can pull one of these tags and go buy the gift and bring it in on the first Sunday of Advent as a way. That's the narrow road. These are ways that we can contribute to God's kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. When we're on this path, we're not focused on the stones that are coming down. They're being destroyed. We're focused on the rock that is Jesus. This is our foundation. This path is the way we know that everything is going to be okay. When you're on this path, all you see is destruction. When you see on this path, you see a firm foundation in Jesus Christ. Are you with me, church? Watch out. Don't be afraid. Don't panic. Don't lose your head when things go nuts in the world, because it's inevitable. It's going to happen. You go down that road. And this is what I want you to say. I didn't say this in first service, and I feel bad that I forgot. But this is God's judgment. This is God's wrath. He turns us over to what we want, right? A lot of times we think God's going to, send down lightning bolts. The way God judges and pours out his wrath is he lets us have what we want. And we're going to be studying the book of Revelation in January on Wednesday nights. And you'll see this in the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire destroyed itself. They ate each other. They destroyed each other. And that's the way the world works. And, when Israel was off base, when they were not taking care of the widows and the orphans, and they started to worship idols, what did God do? God let Babylon come and wipe them out. That's judgment. God took his hands off and let them experience what they want. And we all know those consequences when we go down the wrong path. They're hard, right? They're hurt, right? It's like a parent when their teenagers go the wrong direction. The parent sometimes, after telling them 1,000 million times, no, don't do this. Sometimes the only way we learn our lesson is to experience the consequences ourselves. And I would imagine if I asked you to raise your hand when you were a teenager, you learned the hard way. We all did. But sometimes in our spiritual life, God the Father allows us to experience the consequences to wake us up, to help us realize that there's a different path. And so as we look at next steps today, there's a lot of next steps here, practical ways that we can help, right? But the most important thing that I desire for you is to stay on this narrow road, stay focused on Jesus, the exact imprint of the Father, right? And when we follow Jesus, we experience the life. Even though it's hard sometimes, we experience the internal peace that we know we need more than anything else, right? But we can make a difference here in Columbus as it is in heaven. We can make a difference, a life that makes a difference. Stay on the narrow path. Stay focused on Jesus. Watch out and don't be surprised. It's inevitable at times. But one day, Jesus is going to come back and make all this new. Amen? Let's pray. Father, sometimes it's so hard to have hope. I mean, this world is crumbling, one stone falling down after another, and we see it, and we experience it, and we feel it, and it's hard. We turn on the news, and it's like, it's just massive chaos, and we don't even know what to believe. But Jesus, you tell us that we shouldn't be surprised when we see wars, and we hear rumors of wars. We shouldn't be surprised when there's famines and pandemics and earthquakes and all of these things, because it's the inevitability of moving away from you. Jesus, I pray that you would guide us on the narrow road, that you would help us see that there's life, the life that was meant to be, a life that makes a difference, a life that matters. It's following after you, it's imitating you, and it's leading others and influencing others to follow. Lord, help us to take our next steps today to make a difference here in Columbus as it is in heaven. And Lord, help us to stay on the narrow road. We love you and we thank you, and we pray this in Jesus' wonderful name. And everybody said,